Alrighty. The GOAT, Orvar Hart, the great crispy critter, the one and only true Hunter x Hunter fan, Togashi's greatest soldier, one of the most sophisticated hunter chats to exist in the great white web. So, to start off first, I'm not too apologetic about it, but I still haven't finished the videos that I've been currently working on. I have two ideas. One, I just simply need to work on the slide for it. And two, it's been in the editing process for a couple of weeks now. I just haven't been getting back to it. So what I'm doing instead is sitting down here and farming the Hunter x Hunter subreddit. The most delusional, well, I won't say delusional, but most fraudulent side of the fandom. The people who do not truly appreciate Hunter x Hunter, who do not truly appreciate Togashi. They're on the same equivalent as the Yu tarts. You know, simply for the fact that they don't really appreciate or understand Togashi. They disgrace Hunter x Hunter. And three, they gas up the inferior story and they don't even watch the better version of it. They don't even read the manga. So instead they gas up the horrendous anime. You know, they're idiots. So they think that their story is genuinely good, but enough about the Yu slander. That's a whole other post entirely. So a couple hours, 6 hours ago, I stumbled upon this post. Similarities between Game of Thrones and Hunter x Hunter. And I began my tirade through it. And this was throughout the course of several hours where a bunch of thirsty, fraudulent people would, you know, come after yours truly, the GOAT, and make known their idiocy. And of course, I dog walked them all the way through. And it eventually got to a point where I just decided to, you know, start trolling. And I'll start making this more of a point where I will start making more videos specifically targeting or combing through the Hunter x Hunter subreddit and their posts and discussing them. You know, the low, you know, how low effort it is. You know, or like specific, you know, most of these posts are like boring as hell, you know, just artwork, stupid theories that could just, stupid theories or questions that could just be answered by watching or reading the story. You know, very moronic stuff like that, very low level. My younger brother is smarter than these people. But anyway, let's begin. We'll start with the main post. Now, I have no malice towards above one average. You know, he knows me on Twitter, supposedly. You know, he knew me as the great crispy critter, you know. So, he'll most likely watch and see this video. He may not like what I say. He may like it. Doesn't matter. I'm going to make this anyway. So, it's going to be less about this post and more about the war here. The comment section. Now, but I will read this to begin with. And he says, the first book of the novel was published in '96. The manga was published in '98. So perhaps Togashi read the beginning of the novel and quote some of the things. The wolf was from outside his area behind the wall, while the fox bear was inside his area. Both of their mothers, referring to the animals, they died. Both wildlife, and both Gon and Bronn wanted to take care of them. Ned and Kite are trying to kill the animal, but Gon and Bronn wanted to prevent him from that. Scene of the hero, which is at the weird tree. I'll show that in a bit. Gon and Bronn promised their mothers, spoiler manga, since the beginning of Succession War. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Seemed clear that Togashi wanted to create an arc similar to Game of Thrones, in his way, but with the last chapters and the bastard children. I confirm that. Do you have other ideas that I did not mention? Now, my first point, what truly began the snowball, is that there is the stigma that Togashi is copying J.R.R. Martin. or that Succession War, you know, is Game of Thrones, or like, you know, that basically that Togashi is taking from his bag, when in reality that's not the case, because Togashi did this first with Three Kings back in Yu Yu Hakusho, and that manga was from 91 to 94. You know, so first off, he already did it. He did this first. If we're just simply comparing the two, now in terms of fiction, because it's not like these were the first two pieces of fiction that did this first. You know, of course there was the Rose of Versailles, and which is from the 70s, and Legend of Galactic Heroes, which I think began as a novel, and then it had its anime from the 80s. And these two shows, or these two stories, were doing this decades before Yu Yu and Game of Thrones were even a wink in Togashi or Martin's eye. And Reddit has this really weird thing, the frauds, where instead of actually trying to like speak to you, they like to silently and covertly downvote. You know, very cowardly, very cowardly. You know, rather than actually engage with you, they just do that. That's what really takes me off about the voting, about the downvoting, because it's extremely fraudulent. You can take your time to write down, make an articulate comment, and it just ends up being downvoted because the other guy simply doesn't like it. In short, there is no engagement in Reddit. You can't really engage, you can't talk. There's nothing cerebral or meaningful going on in Reddit. It's the most lowbrow. I at least have like, there's at least more sophisticated like hunter chats in 4chan. But those people are long gone, of course. So anyway, people in the comments, you know, they call this a schizo post. And now I'll, you know, sift through the images here. You know, territorial markings won't last without the mother. Where will they go? Now, I'm not gonna, hold on, let me show the tree thing at first. Right here. Yep. And if you want to see some of these specifically, you can just pause it. Came out in '96 in English. 6 years after that, so even if Togashi's fluent enough to read English. Random fantasy story instead of well-known literature that has to get popular in English first, and then popular in English. Been reading Game of Thrones in these 2 years. And this is an interesting point. This is a good point. A lot of people don't know that, you know, Hunter x Hunter takes a lot, specifically early Hunter x Hunter, takes a lot from Dragon Ball, and takes quite a bit from Dragon Quest, Dino Daiboken. You know, characters, and it's, you know, it's pretty much the same. You know, a child character who's mostly lives in the wild. You know, of course, it's very different from the stuff with the dire wolf and all that. Go schizophrenic posts, pretty much what I described, what I talked about a few minutes ago. Mankind has started domestication. And here's me, the goat, yours truly. And here's what I state. Togashi came up with the political arc about succeeding on the throne, but in Yu Yu with Three Kings, years before Martin took a crack at it. This is unrelated when it comes to which is better, but comparing Martin to Togashi is the greatest honor you can give GRRM Martin, who is vastly inferior. A lot of people did not take kindly to this. I don't know why. I don't know how people are still so fraudulent. You know, they suck up to Martin when he's a fraud. And I'm going to explain it. I will explain it, since people like, a lot of people like to claim, a lot of people claimed in the comments that, oh, that's just because of the show. You know, You didn't read the books, it was better. No, dude. The writing itself is fundamentally weak. Like, it's, well, not fundamentally weak, it's good. But compared to Togashi, unimpressive, bro. Unimpressive. Hunter x Hunter, peak world building, the best power system in fiction. Even One Piece tards. They swear on Loda that Hunter x Hunter is inferior, but even some of them have to swallow their pride and admit that Nen is at least one of the best things about Hunter x Hunter, because that's the only thing they can like. Because they would look stupid, you know, they would look stupid if they said or thought otherwise. And of course, the second best power system in fiction is Trion from World Trigger. And that's neither here nor there. People aren't ready for that discussion. And here we have bum number 1. He says, "Oh wow, no, Martin is not vastly inferior. These are my 2 favorite settings, and they honestly compare in quality." That's very disrespectful to Togashi. But anyway, Ice and Fire is the Hunter x Hunter of literature. A deeply complex world with ruthless politics and morally ambiguous personalities. Secret societies, a focus on early teens, blah 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 blah, yada yada yada, yap yap yap. Yeah, but like, here's the thing. Like, all that is okay, but it's like Togashi just did it better, bro. Like, because here's the thing. There's less people like actually trying to like politically scheme and trying to like one up or outsmart everybody compared to Hunter x Hunter. That's an issue I have with the Rose of Versailles as well, from where I am currently at least. There's like, yeah, with Rose of Versailles it's different, you know, it's leading up to the French Revolution, you know, all this classism stuff. But then there's like less people scheming for the throne or to like, vie for power. Whereas like Hunter x Hunter, just, it gets that specific itch out of me. Yeah, this guy says, really haven't read the books. Now, the power system is trash, and it's just Deus Ex Machina to force the plot and give J.R.R. Martin plausible cause to kill off characters. Because the idea of multiple players playing chess against each other for the throne is too complex. Now, let me explain this, because a lot of people are dumb. So, in the story, you know, we get to the part of the Clash of 5 Kings. You know, obviously there's 5 kings, 5 characters that are all vying for the throne. This makes the story a lot more interesting and layered and complex because now there's way more active pieces. That's basically what Succession War is, where Togashi has 14 princes, all these queens, you know, and all these different like factions and players, and they all influence the plot in some way. And they're all making moves in this giant political web. So this guy Martin, this is what I'm talking about. The fundamental difference in skill of writing compared to Fraud Martin and Togashi. Togashi can just casually introduce Beyond's kids. Just casually segue like Beyond's importance into the plot. Can just introduce more aspects and facets. Like the Succession War currently, it's been simply turned on its head. Zhang Li and Lazarus are no longer in tier 1, which basically just changes the game. Benjamin is now dying. Hulkenberg is MIA. Seti's slowly becoming more powerful. We don't know what Kaiser wants. Some of the queens still haven't active yet. The caste systems are about to make their moves. What else? Oh yeah, and Crollo. Crollo is now trying to get these treasures in order to develop the power or reach the power necessary for him to be able to take down Hisoka, and for good. All this while martial law is currently happening as we speak. This is infinitely far more complex, and this was all within the span of 10 chapters. Whereas if Martin was writing the plot, or if if Togashi decided not to want to write anymore, and I told Martin, hey yo Martin, I hit him up, Martin, write the story for me. I'd give him everything. I'd give him all the clues. Well, I won't give him Togashi's notes. It would be too easy for him at that point. A child could write it at that point. Sure, it won't have the same level of sauce, but you know, he'd still be a child could write it. You know, if you just give him all the answers. It's like giving you the study guide to a math exam. You know, you don't have to try. And I basically tell Martin, write Succession War from this point on. Just try it. His mind would explode. Succession War is already far more complex than Mid of Thrones. But people aren't ready for that conversation because they're not smart enough. They're not cultured. You know, they don't respect Togashi enough. They don't truly, like, ironic. They masquerade themselves as Hunter fans and Togashi fans. But they're not really about it like that. But anyway, back to slandering Martin and telling the truth. So there's this thing called the Clash of Five Kings. You have Stanley. You have Stannis Baratheon, aka he's basically Benjamin. Renly Baratheon, aka basically Hulkenberg, but Hulkenberg's better written, of course, because he actually lives up to some potential. Whereas Renly's a great character and doesn't, you know, he goes nowhere because Martin's a fraud. You have Joffrey, you have Tywin, you have Robb, you know, you have all these guys. So, what does Martin do here? I'll tell you, he basically kills off Renly Baratheon by introducing magic. And by the way, the magic is bare bones. Like, this guy was basically, hold on, let me look at it. I'll look at it later. Because then people are going to be like, oh, you misunderstood his comment, man. Misunderstood his comment, man. Like, he didn't say that, man. You're making yourself look bad, man. I'll go to it later, don't worry. So, my issue is that you have these 5 kings, and they're all vying for power. Very interesting setup. So what he does is basically introduce this corny little magic system, and effectively just kills off Renly, which just simplifies the plot. So Renly's a character that does nothing, or achieves nothing. There's nothing of substance or interest to him. I mean, what's interesting about Renly is that he knows that he needs to become king, but that requires the death of people. But he himself is a kind person. AKA, it's a very interesting dichotomy. That's what makes Hulkenberg so good. You know, that's what makes him top 3 in the series, but people aren't ready for that conversation. And I've been glazing Hulkenberg since 2018. Because I'm actually a smart Hunter fan who reads the story and appreciates it. Watch. In like the next 10 or 20 or so chapters, we're going to start glazing Hulkenberg. I mean, people have already been glazing him off chapters 403, 404. But my issue is that because Martin doesn't have the level of sauce and gravitas as Togashi, so because the plot has become way too unwieldy, he basically had to kill off a character just to simplify the plot for him. Whereas Togashi, being the GOAT that he is, enhances and adds more complexity and nuance to the plot, which effectively makes it more interesting and makes it far more impressive to see. And this isn't something new with Martin, because there's a reason why Winds of Winter hasn't been out for 14 years, simply because he's crumbling under the weight of his own ambition. You know, the story has become way too complex for him. He doesn't have, of course, there's a matter of age. You know, when you're working on something for so long, you develop kind of apathy to it. You want to like focus on other projects that are far simpler, don't require that much mental effort, don't require that much like strenuous, doesn't require that much strenuous effort or anything like that. You know, but the fact is, Winds of Winter and Game of Thrones hasn't continued simply because Martin doesn't have the skill, and the story has become far too ambitious for him. And I know the diehard J.R.R. Martin tards are gonna dislike the video, you know, are gonna like scream and be mad in the comments. You know, it's undeniable. It's unavoidable. deeply complex. Now let me look for the magic system. Magical. Face changing. Brawler magic, glass candles, giving future insight. Which, by the way, abilities to see the future are trash, especially if it's in service to the good guys. Like, I hated that shit in Escaflowne. I hated that in Season 6, where they basically, like, that's how they screwed over Littlefinger. It's only cool when it's in service to the good guys. And the only other, like, piece of fiction I've seen, like, where it's done good in service of the good guys is... But that's just because the ability itself is very limited. You know, Diablo, in service to the bad guys. It's far more interesting. Enhance the world building. And this is basically his comment about basically saying, oh, you need to respect the magic system more, man. You know, it's on the level of Hunter, you know, Nen. Bro, relax. This sounds basic. Like, this just sounds uninteresting, and even then, it's very bare bones. Like, it just sounds like a bunch of random nonsense. Like, it's just not that interesting. It's not concrete. It's not something like... There's nothing mechanical. It's just a bunch of random stuff, and even then, it doesn't go into that much detail about it. It's whatever. Whereas, like, Nen, like, you can write a whole encyclopedia about Nen. And, of course, I started throwing Robert Jordan and Wheel of Time to, you know, clown on it. And it was funny. You know, calling Martin on the level Togashi disrespectful to Sensei. And this was crazy. Martin matches Togashi in character depth, political complexities, and creative world building. No, he doesn't. And I've already explained it. You know, the story of Martin is so complex, specifically for him. It's so complex for him that he can't even continue the story. Whereas Succession Wars' level of complexity is 10 times more than Martin. And here's the thing with Game of Thrones story and Succession War, and a large part of it is the setting. With Martin, you know, with Game of Thrones, a lot of these characters are across the map. You know, they're not in close proximity to each other, so it's a lot more easier to write POVs. Because a lot of these POVs are, like, mostly in a bubble. You know, what Bronn is doing, for example, with, like, these other characters, or what Jon Snow is doing over here and there. You know, it's not going to directly affect the world. It's mostly going to affect... It's very self-contained. Whereas if we're looking at the Black Whale, everybody's pretty much in close proximity to each other. And this requires way more finesse and control. Because everyone's actions will undoubtedly cause a ripple effect and affect the other characters. You know, what Benjamin does could affect this character. What that character does in response to this affects that character. You know, like the letters, you know, in chapter 402, and how it basically affected all of this stuff. You know, and how Kurapika is basically thinking, like, wait, what's going on? Like, why is Camilo now making her move? Was it because of the letters? You know? It's very interesting, and it causes, like, this chain reaction. That's not there in Game of Thrones, and it's not immediate. This requires way more finesse than Succession War. That's why, bro, that's why Succession War to me is perfect, man. That's why it's disrespect. Very disrespectful. And then he says, matches Togashi in character depth. Relax. Relax, bro. Like, there are barely any characters in Game of Thrones, besides a few, and they don't even crack the top 20 of Hunter x Hunter characters. Let's be real here, dog. None of them touch Medium, none of them touch Poof, and Poof's the best character in Hunter x Hunter. So far, he's the most completed character. None of them touch Godsoka, none of them touch Seti. And Joffrey's just an inferior Seti, by the way. None of them touch Morena, who's on her way to the top 20. Who's on her way to the top 10, by the way. Best female character in Hunter. Not even close. Doesn't touch Jing, Pariston, Gon, Killua, you know, Kurapika. Like, let's be real here. Alright, let's see any of this extra fraudulence. I don't know how long this video is gonna be. I'll try to make it short. This guy's fraudulent. I'm just gonna move on. Both are masters of their own craft. No, they're not. No, they're not, bro. Well, only Togashi. Only Togashi is master of the craft, but like, he's not just a master of the craft. Like, he is the craft. Like, he's the best. He's the best in fiction. You know, the greatest writer of all time, the GOAT. You know, the undisputed king, the best characters, the best side, you know, the best arcs in the game, the best power system in fiction, not even close, not undebatable. The best side cast, the best family dynamics of all time. Lannisters sit down, like, the Hyuga dynasty is where it's at, bro. The Kakin dynasty is unreal, you know. Game of Thrones fell off, you know. And yeah, that's true. It's disrespectful to Tolkien. There's a reason why Martin looked at Tolkien's grave one day when he was visiting England, and he basically said, I wonder if I'll be remembered like that, and that he has to make the right choices. There's a reason why this man is Tolkien is considered one of the GOATs, even after all these years later. Even though Lord of the Rings isn't even that, like, you know, it's a very simple story about good versus evil. You know, but it still hits to this day. It's still one of the GOATs. It's an impressive piece of, like, impressive work. And these guys are basically saying that, oh, like, yeah, because of the directors. What people don't know is that there's a reason why Martin has more beef with the guy who worked on House of the Dragon Season 2 compared to the D&D. You know, very childish, by the way. Very childish. The dude's in his 70s. And he gets pissy and mad with the fact that, you know, his inputs feels like, you know, brushed off. Like, yo, I'm the creator. I'm the one, my input should be here. You know, it should be the most important thing. It should be, you know, paramount. You know, he got pretty mad at that, and he had beef. Like, he didn't even come to the I forget what that thing was called, where they all gathered to promote the show. He wasn't there for it. You know, he was way more interested in, like, Dunk and Egg and all this other nonsense, because he's way more interested in working on everything but the book. But hey, I ain't like that big of a Game of Thrones fan, so I'm not losing anything. I don't care. But anyway, the point is, there's a reason why Martin is a lot more lenient to D&D compared to the guy who worked on House of the Dragon Season 2. And I'll tell you why. That's because D&D actually took from Martin, you know? The stuff that we saw in the show, in the finale, either these were unused ideas, or they were ideas that he had, but people didn't like them, you know? And a lot of people speculate that this gave him pause, you know? So a lot of people like to say that Game of Thrones fell off. Like, they like to say that, oh, season, you know, these later shows were trash. They essentially like to put too much, like, flack on D&D. When no, dude, like, there's a lot more nuance to the case here. And of course, this was funny when the moderator deleted this idiot's comment where they were calling me a weirdo, and a lot of downvotes. You know, let's look at the downvotes real quick. 2, 1, 4. Basically proving my point about what I said like minutes ago about these guys doing this. And now here's a One Piss Tard. Hold on, what is this? Mainly. Whatever. Yep. What a weird stance. Comparing Martin to Togashi is the best on you can get. You're speaking as if Togashi turned water to wine. He pretty much did. Also, time of writing does not signify quality, so I don't know why you bring up that matters. These guys are dumb. I did not bring up Yu Yu Hakusho and Three Kings because of quality. Bro, Reddit people are so stupid, man. Like, you can't legitimately have good conversations with these people because they're chronically online. They don't go out and absorb enough vitamin D. You know, they don't have any, like, good, fulfilling jobs. They don't do anything. That's why I enjoy more. And even then, Hunter and Twitter are kind of accessible, too. We have idiots on there as well. It's truly unescapable. But the fact is, these guys are dumb. I brought up Yu Yu Hakusho 3 Kings not because of quality, but because in the context of comparing Martin and Togashi and who took whose bag, Togashi made 3 Kings first, which came out a few years before Game of Thrones was even came out. Therefore, Togashi did the thing first. Now, it's a completely different story if we were talking about who did this thing in general. Because then we're not talking about 2 writers. You know, we're not comparing, we're not juxtaposing these 2 writers, you know. Clearly obviously Togashi and these guys didn't do it first. Hell, maybe Shakespeare did it first with Hamlet, you know? Or Macbeth. Granted, those stories are inferior to Togashi and they barely have any political intrigue. You know, I do know there's like the other one. I don't read too much of that, but Shakespeare. And that's not the point of this. So I'll move on from that. People just think little of J.R.R. Martin. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've always been down to slander him, even before, even when I was watching the show. Like, this isn't just something, you know, because of him being lazy or like what he's basically done. Of course, I explained my reasons. Like, otherwise, the story is pretty much basic. But hey, look at -6. Yeah, blame the OP. Yeah, because people are saying why you're making the comparison. The post. You know, this guy did it first to begin with. 2 are comparable. Like, this is very goofy. This is factual here. Like, if you actually pay attention and read Succession War and what Togashi's doing, and look at J.R.R. Martin's actions and the way he's handled it, and the writing decisions that we've seen in the story, like, think about it. He even got rid of, even if it makes sense, he even got rid of, who was it? Danny's brother. Either way. Viserys. Viserys Targaryen. Hold on. Yeah, you guys, I'm sorry. You guys are going to have to, like, remind me in the comments. I apologize about that one, man. But he basically, you know, it makes sense in the basically what happened to that character's fate. Danny's brother. You know, it's pretty much a case of he basically caused his own fate, you know. But here's the thing. It also is a waste of a death. Because if you think about it, if that character was still kept alive, it would have made things more interesting. You know, it would have added more elements, more stuff to think about. Like, for example, what happens if he would have met Joffrey? You know, what sort of character scenes would arise from that? That's what I'm talking about with Martin. You know, he kills off these characters to simplify the plot and cull things because it'll be too unwieldy for him. Whereas Togashi welcomes the challenge. Granted, people think this is another stigma that I'd like to clear up right now when it comes to Succession War, because people like to make the claim that, oh, Togashi wrote himself in a corner, he doesn't know how to continue or finish Succession War. They love to slander my goat like that, when in reality, like, no, you're an idiot. We're not even 50% done through the story. We may be close to getting past the halfway mark and to the beginning of the long conclusion that could be 50 to 60 chapters long. You know, Togashi's not writing himself in a corner. This was always the story he had planned out. He's just simply too much of a goat for you to comprehend. Like, there's a reason why all these mangaka gas Togashi. Like, you know, Gege, he basically made an entire, like, manga just to glaze Togashi Yoshihiro Sensei. Yep. And I speak the truth. You know, and I get downvoted for it. You know, that's the anomaly of Reddit, man. Like, it's very goofy. I mean, hey, Jesus told the truth and he was nailed to the cross. Yep. You can, of course, you can pause this. You can pause this. Oh yeah, me when Togashi created the concept of core intrigue and throne politics in the 90s. This guy's such an idiot, bro. Like, I explained in several other comments that Rose of Versailles, yeah, right here, Rose of Versailles and Legend of the Galactic Heroes. And of course, this guy was, you know, being satirical. First off, I never upvoted you. I downvoted. You know, consuming media that isn't manga, and I think a very narrow perspective. And no, I don't really care about Martin either. About drop the ball and its potential heavy. A shred of intellect here. A shred of intellect. But I don't take disrespect. You know, first off, I consume far more media than you guys. Most of you guys here, all you guys mostly probably experience like manga, and that's about it. Manga or comics. I'm a connoisseur. I read books. Not fiction books, I read real books. Political treatise. Hannah Arendt's The Human Condition. You know, I read real sophisticated books. You know? Dante's Inferno. You know, The Odyssey. I read sophisticated books. I'm not like one of you bums. You know, I read The Prince. You know, I'm well learned. Like, relax, dog. And all of this still pales in comparison to Succession War. You're an idiot, yup. Yup. And of course he thinks that he's like, you know, making fun of me or anything like that. And this person's a special idiot. Because they're talking about my ego. And of course I'm the GOAT. And you scream like one. And I talked about Martin. And this person basically came in with no knowledge. That's how goated I am. No glaze, but that's just how goated I am. I've got these people locked in. You know, I got these people locked in. They're fascinated by me. You know? I could say whatever I want on the planet. And they don't know anything about it. They probably don't even care about the subject. But because it's me, they'll tune in. You know? Hold on. Okay, now let's go back. And here's OP. Well, I'm not reading that. Whatever. Lower than Kubo and Kishimoto. At their worst. Bro, now that is a hot take. That is a hot take, man. Now, I don't care about Bleach. I never read it. I clown on Kishimoto. But that's about it. Like, I'll let these idiots, you know, to it. This is interesting, too. I start explaining... This is one of the more, like, informative comments I make. And it was downvoted. It makes no sense. This is what I'm talking about, man. Like... Either they don't like you as a person, or like, people on Reddit have such brain rot. Like, they don't know how to actually engage. In real life, they probably wish that a downvote button exists and they could just simply move on. But that's not how the real world works, you know? You actually have to engage with the person, you know? These people, you know, they're clowns. They like to exist in their little shells. And I spat the truth here. Nothing but the truth. I'm the GOAT here. I'm one of the most knowledgeable people about Togashi. And not even I'm not even like one of those guys that like, that have like whole like Tumblr blogs about his Yu. I know there's people like that. And very specific people who only like focus on that aspect of Togashi's life. You know, they have interviews, they have all this doujinshi artwork, everything. And here you take a serious vote. I don't take the voting, the downvote itself serious. It's the mentality behind it. But, you know, hold on. And he says, then a red character comes out of nowhere and wins the tournament. Brother, it's impossible that Togashi would want to turn the Three Kings conflict with Ichiro having a king fighting among themselves into a tournament, with the winner suddenly appearing and winning. It's clear that the magazine interfered, even if Togashi himself denies it. So we're saying Togashi himself is lying. It's crazy, man, because people like to say Three Kings was rushed. And I'm going to make this last point before I wrap up the video. People like to have the stigma that Yu Yu Hakusho was rushed, that Three Kings was rushed. But here's the thing. When you look at Togashi's writing style, you know, when you look at Togashi's writing style, this is usually how he ends arcs, man. But let's look at Three Kings first. You know, the story was going to end in 6 months when he informed his assistant. And he basically starts off the story in a political faction. And it's unlike anything before in the medium and in Yu Yu Hakusho. It already subverts the shonen expectations of a story. You know, it goes political. And then he subverts that by going to the tournament. You know, and then you're thinking, oh, okay. Like, is it going to be like Dark Tournament? You know, it's going to be like Dragon Ball? It's going to get like full tournament arc? We're going to get fight. No, and then Togashi subverts it then yet again by cutting it as soon as Yomi and Yusuke fight. Of course, the anime fans who don't read the manga because they don't like to read the manga think that Yomi and Yusuke genuinely fought, you know, but that was anime only, that was filler. But in the manga, the fight cuts off as soon as it starts. There is no weird out of character conflict with Yusuke suddenly having like this weird like existential crisis, you know, which makes no sense because he wanted to have the tournament in the first place because this is the kind of, it's in character. He doesn't care about political stuff like this. He's not that smart. He's more of a meathead. People like to say, oh, that's out of character too. No, dude, it's not. Go reread Yu Yu Hakusho. Him enjoying fights was always a big part of his character. But anyway, he basically subverts expectations. Not only does Yusuke and Kurama and Hiei all lose, the fight's just cut off as soon as it starts. And then we just have Yusuke talking. Or Yusuke talking to... No, maybe it was Kurama and Kuwabara in a restaurant. But either way, that's basically where the story goes. Togashi essentially subverts shonen by having it be a political arc. Then he subverts the arc itself by going to the shonen roots with a tournament. And the tournament doesn't even end. And it cuts off as soon as the fight starts with the main antag and MC Yusuke. And the fight you don't even get to see the conclusion, but you know Yusuke was defeated. And he's saying red character comes out of nowhere and wins the tournament. It makes sense. It was explained. You know, Yomi and Mukuro were both exhausted from their earlier bouts. and this person simply ended up winning. That's just the way it is, you know. It makes complete sense. They like to say that, you know, Togashi, like when Three Kings and how it was completed, it's broken down like that. And then you look at the way Togashi writes arcs to begin with, you know, it's meant to be anticlimactic. You know, you look at Hunter exam, the only fight you get is Gon versus, and even then it's not a legitimate fight. And then he just, basically the arc just ends, the tournament just ends there. You know, you don't get anything else. You know, Heaven's Arena, you know, they're not interested in the Battle Olympia. Their goal is simply to fight, Gon's goal is simply to fight Hisoka and return the badge to him. And he doesn't even win that fight, which makes sense. You know, logically he's not supposed to win that fight. He's not strong enough. But in most shonen, the good guy would usually win. Hell, even when he fought Hanzo, if it was any other writer, Gon would have defeated Hanzo because of the power of friendship. You know, or some nonsense like that. You know, York knew. It doesn't end in some big bombastic fight between Kurapika and the Truth. You know, instead the arc just kind of shifts gears and it becomes a hostage exchange. Greed Island, you know, it all ends with a quiz. And even then, that's the most shonen of all the most shonen of the arcs. Chimera Ant, you don't get some big bombastic fight with Gon Medium. They don't even meet, they don't even get to speak one. You know, the last Gon versus Pito is a very anticlimactic fight. You know, it just ends with a few blows. You know, it's a very short fight. You know, for like shonen junkies, it's not gonna feel it. It's not gonna be a Bleach. It's not gonna be a Naruto. It's not gonna be a One Piece. You know, it's not gonna be like that. Hell, it's not even like Yu Yu Hakusho, Yusuke Togashi, or like Yusuke Sensui. Even though once Yusuke achieved his demon form, even then it still wasn't like he wasn't clearing his Sensui. Ryzen had to step in. He couldn't even beat Yomi. Well, in the anime, he couldn't beat. You at least got more of a fight, but he still couldn't beat him. You know, level E. Like, nearly every arc is anticlimactic. This is Togashi's writing style. People saying that, oh, he didn't plan out the tournament, that it was that the manga and that the magazine interfered, you know, and he had to shift gears. No, literally explains it right here in Sensei Hakusho. Are we saying Togashi is wrong then? Like, legit, he even explains it to one of his assistants here, that the tournament was not gonna last. You know, this was how it was gonna be. This was the idea, because this is how Togashi writes. And people like to, like, it's meant to be, it's not meant to be satisfying. You know, it's meant to be anticlimactic. And that's the beauty of it. But of course, people don't get that. And most people are probably going to gloss over this. They're probably not even going to listen to the video. And they're going to willfully keep disliking. Granted, no beef to this guy. He received flack for this post too. People called this a schizo post. People said, yo, we need chapters real quick, man, to basically save us from the void of these posts. I agree. I agree. We do need the chapters back, because the Hunter subreddit is trash. And we have this bum. Basically, this guy's saying sauce. I am saucy, thank you. And this guy is, you know, laughing emoji. The show is garbage. Even Mr. Fantastic couldn't reach this far. Would get its next chapter first. Relax, bro. We know it's gonna be Hunter. We know it's gonna be Hunter, bro. Togashi came back 20 chapters, and it was like a 4 to 5 year hiatus, and he still came back before Martin. Schizo posting is back on the menu. Cell finally lost it. He took scenes from Hunter x Hunter. Yeah, pretty much people taking the piss. There isn't that much left to talk about. I don't think I'm missing or forgetting anything. The big main points is the subreddit is very goofy. A lot of clownery going on here. Three Kings is not rushed. Maybe before, like, some aspects of it were like changed or rushed, but in terms of the tournament and the idea of like the arc consistently shifting gears, because that's Togashi liking the anticlimactic route, is very Togashi. That is not out of character. That wasn't because of what the magazine made him do. What the magazine, see, people like to say, oh, but he wanted to, like, you know, the doujinshi, the apology, you know, where he wanted to. That was mostly in terms of Chapter Black, because that arc was a lot more serious. But hopefully I'll get this video, you know, edited and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'll do my best to get the video done. Toodles.